Several years ago, Tom and I attended a horticulture show in the Twin Cities. One of the companies exhibiting there was Sustane Fertilizer, and I got to visit with the owner, Craig Holden. He explained a little about how they make the Sustane products, and it sounded so interesting. Last month I called Craig to ask if Prairie Yard Garden could come to learn about his fertilizer, and he said that would be just fine. Thanks so much, Craig, for letting us come.
You're most welcome.
Please tell me, how did Sustane Fertilizer get started?
I grew up on a mixed livestock crop farm near here, about 15 miles to the west by Northfield. We raised turkeys and pigs and a number of other livestock. When I returned from college, we started looking for better ways to utilize the manure. Our cropland had been in the family for 4 generations. We were nutrient-rich soils, and a local agronomist suggested that we start a giveaway program to neighboring crop farmers that had gone to crop production but didn't have livestock for manure. And ironically, nobody wanted it when it was free. We looked at a better way to store it. We produce turkeys year-round in Minnesota, so we clean barns year-round, but we can only apply manure during the spring or fall. The composting process destroys pathogens through the metabolic energy of the microbes that break it down. The piles get very hot, and that enables us to safely store manure on the farm that wouldn't cause any or spread any disease from a previous flock to the young flocks. It also makes a homogeneous product that's easier to deliver and apply at agronomic rates. So aerobic composting was sort of new at the time, and we took it as an opportunity to transform a waste material into a valuable resource that it is. I started my first experimental composting in 1979. We made our first product in 1980, a little bit, a few hundred ton, and we sold to a crop farmer that actually lives right near here. We're near Kenyon, Minnesota. Turkey litter is the combination of the droppings from the birds, a little bit of spilled feed and spilled water from the barns, and the litter. The litter is the bedding that we raise the turkeys on. It's usually softwood pine shavings or sometimes rice hulls or oat hulls. But as you know, turkeys are not raised on cage floors. So the manure has to be collected, and you have to have nice soft bedding for them to walk on. So it's a combination of manure droppings and carbonaceous bedding primarily. The composting process is taking an organic material, and you can use any organic material like leaves or grass clippings or dairy manure, and it's basically decomposing it to from its raw form into a stable form of humus. And humus is, by definition, the point at which organic matter has sort of reached its maximum decomposition. It's a stable material. The composting process uses nitrogen, which we get from the droppings, carbon, which we get from the bedding, oxygen we get from the atmosphere, and water that we get from rainfall. So those 4 elements, under the right environment, mixed together, start decomposing material very rapidly. And our process is called aerobic, meaning in the presence of oxygen, thermophilic, heat-loving microorganisms that decompose the raw organic matter and change it into, from a heterogeneous material, into a homogeneous material that's very uniform and very stable biologically. Turkey litter is delivered here year-round as barns are cleaned. They're laid out in these long ricks, which we call windrows. And we have a windrow turning machine you can see in the distance that's aerating the material. It's turning the material inside out. A fresh supply of oxygen for the microbes that are indigenous to the material. They in turn metabolize and heat up the piles to very high temperatures and break down the product in the process.
How do you monitor the temperature in the piles?
We have a long stem thermometer probe with a digital readout, and the temperatures are monitored every week to make sure that we're hitting what's called the thermophilic zone, which is about between 120 and 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we know we're getting rapid and thorough decomposition. And by turning the rows inside and out, all particles are eventually exposed to those internal temperatures.
How long does this process go on here?
It varies with the material you're composting, but we've learned over many years of doing this that it takes our material 26 weeks to achieve complete biological stability.
So then you keep this going even in the wintertime?
We compost year-round. Nothing slows us down except maybe a blizzard. Other than that, the microbes are busy working all the time, and the windows never freeze.
Craig, do you have to worry about smell from the facility?
There is some odor when we're turning or aerating the rows, but we're very fortunate. This site is about 1 mile in any direction from the closest neighbor. And the odor is pretty minimal, or I should say it doesn't last very long. As a material compost, the odor goes away. But with the fresh manure, there is some, but it's not really any different than most farming operations.
Do you have to worry about controlling runoff from all of this?
We do. This is a MPCA, Pollution Control Agency permitted facility. And so we had to create an engineered site. We've got compacted clay pad that slopes. There's drainage to the south, or all the precipitation that comes in contact with the windrows is contained within runoff containment ponds. So there's never any water that spills over. The water is either recycled back on the rows, or when we have excess, like this past spring, we had to knife the excess water into the area cropland. There's 7 groundwater monitoring wells surrounding the site, and we actually were required to monitor those 2 times a year for the past 35 years. And because that was a big concern about permitting originally, that it's going to contaminate groundwater. And as costly as it was to put in these wells and do all that monitoring for so many years with the hydrogeologists, the state just informed us this past spring that they're no longer requiring groundwater monitoring because there's never been any change in the environment. So we're very pleased about that. We work really hard to maintain a clean ship and to be a good neighbor. It's very important to us.
So where does the compost go from here?
Once the compost is mature after 26 weeks, it's loaded up into a semi-end dump and transported to our manufacturing plant in Cannon Falls, where we dehydrate, granulate, blend, package, and ship.